Hey guys, welcome back. So up to now we have built all the features we wanted to build. We have the authentication, we have the CRUD for tutus. So in this one, I want to introduce you guys to unit testing your Django applications. So I'm going to be showing you the tools that Django avails and the different ways you can go around testing your Django applications. So the reason for that is testing is really important, especially for any project that you're going to put in production, because the way software works is we are always making changes to the software. We're always updating some code to make it more performant. So whenever you have a code base that don't have tests, it makes room for you making errors when you're changing things in the future. So the way this should be done is whenever you're writing the app, so whenever you start to work on a feature, let's say you're working on registering a user, you need to make sure that you work on a feature and at the time you're delivering that feature, it has all the tests that will keep it intact, such that in the future when you're changing things, you don't accidentally change something and then it breaks the registration. Similarly, this is very common when you're working in teams. So whenever you're working in teams, everyone is on their business. Now, of course, teams will always have like coding conventions to make sure that maybe people write code in a specific way. So almost on every team you're going to work on, you're going to be needed to write tests. So the more tools you have at your disposal, the more life is going to be easier for you. So what we're going to be doing now is we are going to be adding tests for all the features we have written, so that later when someone is maybe making changes to this cool project, they actually don't break anything, or whenever we are really updating packages, we can still be sure that things are still working. So let's go ahead and get started now. Now to write our first test, we are going to start out by writing a very simple test to make sure that a user can access the register page and then the login page. So to get started, we're going to go here. So every time we create an app, so when you say python manage.py start app, you're going to get basically the app folder created. And in that, you're going to find the test.py file. This can be a good starting point to write your tests for this app. Okay, so since this app has many modules, it's always ideal to have like a folder for the tests from which we can have different tests to test these files separately. So I'm going to delete the default test.py file that we get, and then in the app, I'm going to create a folder called tests. Now in here, first I'm going to have a danda init.py file. So this makes this folder a module, so everything we put in this folder can be imported. So in here we can have a file to test our views. So I'm going to have a test views.py file, and also I'm going to have a class to test our models. So test models.py file like this. So in here, let's start from the views. So we want to make sure that the user can access the route for login, and that route should be able to render this template and at the same time allow them to basically log in or create an account. So let's start with the registration. Let's now add a test to make sure that the user is able to access the register page. So here we are going to be using classes, and that's because with classes we can quickly inherit all the major testing features that Django gives us. So here I'm going to have a class. I'm going to call it test views. So in here we're going to be inheriting from a class called test case. Now we need to import test case from Django, of course. So from Django.test import test case. All right. So over here we can have a test. So we're gonna say def test underscore should show register page. So since this is a class, we need to pass self so that we can get access to everything in here and everything we are inheriting in test case. So test case gives us a request client. So think of it like a browser. So we can use it to request things like web pages. So whenever we inherit from test case, we have access to something called client. So we can say self.client, and then over here you can see that we can make requests. So whenever we are accessing the register page, we are making a get request. So over here, we're going to say get, and here we need to pass a path. Now, since we are using Django, in here, we want to be accessing the path by the name. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do reverse, and then I'm going to put the name of the URL route. So that's going to be URLs, and then the register has the name register. So that's going to be this. We need to import reverse. So from Django, URLs, import reverse like this. So this is going to make a request to this URL. Now whenever it makes a request, it gets back a response. So we can save the response inside a variable called response. Now over here we can check if this request was actually able to work. So here, if we went ahead to do self.assert, so now when you do self, you can view all the different options that you can have here. So you can use their assertion method. So you can assert that the response status code returned 200. So whenever we make a request to this page like this and everything was fine, it's going to send us the web page and also a response code 200. So that's why we are asserting that it should give us 200. So also to make sure that it's actually serving us the correct page or the correct template, we can also assert that it gave us a template. So we can say assert template used, and then here we can pass the template. But to pass the template, we also need to pass the response and also the template here. So here we can say, so now our template, remember, is in templates, then authentication, then register. So we can say authentication/register. And here we are not putting templates. That's because Django already knows where our templates are. And when we say assert template used, it's going to know that it needs to check the templates. So now that we have the test, we need to actually run it to see if it actually works. Now I'm going to open up another command line here, so it activates environment. I think that's so. Over here, let me bring in my .env like this. So here, to run the test, you want to run python manage.py, then you put test. So I'm going to run that. So what you're going to see is you're going to see that we have a failure. So something is failing really, and that's because when we made a request here, yes, it might have been 200, but the template that was used from the application is not really register. So at this point, the test has an issue and we need to correct that. So we want to check for the correct template name, and it is register.html. So we want to make sure it is this. Just run back the tests, and now you can see that we get okay and it passed. Good. So now this means that whenever, let's say, we are working on our application somehow, and then let's say we are like in Git and we delete this line somehow, maybe an issue happened. So what will happen is whenever you run these tests, and later I'm going to be showing you how to run these tests in GitHub before we add any other change, you see that things will fail, and then we'll go back and see what changed and correct it. Similarly, let's say someone changed this view to use login. Let's say here we come and say use login or login user. Let's say someone made that change because these problems actually happen. So when we run the test, you see that it fails, and that's because the test now is guarding against any code changes here. So whenever you write your tests and you make sure they were working at the point you added your changes, that's going to be extremely beneficial for you and your team and everyone who will work on that project in the future. So that's how you write your first test. Now I'm going to go ahead to add other tests. So we also want to have similar tests for the login. So let's also check that we can access the login page. So I'm going to go here, bring in the same thing. So should show login page. So here I'm going to change this to login page, and we know this is login, so it should also give us 200. Similarly for the template, we can check that it's using login.html. So that means if someone accidentally deletes login, let's say, let me first run back the test. Now you can see that two tests are passing. So if someone came over here and deleted login like this, and maybe they were pushing a change, they might even be working on things that are not even related to this, but somehow the file gets deleted. So whenever now they run the tests, it's going to fail. It's going to say, hey, something went wrong. There's no template. It doesn't exist. Your test tells me there should be that template. So they can go back, reach out, and make sure that this issue is corrected before we move forward. So let me go ahead here and undo. So I get back my template. So that would happen actually. Someone would come and undo, and now they have back the file. And now when they run the tests, they are passing, and yeah, good. So continuing here, you might be asking yourself, now we are only making GET requests. So we basically are making the request to view the pages, and very well we are able to make sure that some things are kept in check. But how do we really verify that a user is able to sign up? Or how do we really verify that whenever a user clicks the button, they go ahead to get these errors here? because this is also very important. User should always get these errors, since these were the specifications for implementing this feature. We don't want someone to accidentally come and I changed like our password restriction and we don't know about it. So let's say we wanted to add a test to make sure that the user will always see this password error whenever the password is not there, and also these other errors. We would do it this way. So first, we are going to first test for a scenario where they don't supply the username, because you see the username is required and all this other stuff. So over here, remember, we have the client and we can use that to make requests. So over here, I'm going to have a test. So test should sign up user. Okay, so let's first test for a very positive scenario, making sure that the user can sign up on our website. We know we are going to need the username, the email, the password, and then the password confirmation of that password actually. So over here, we're going to have those values. So I'm going to go ahead and create a user. So I'm going to do self.user. And guys, we're going to be like doing a refactor of this later in a few to show you guys how you can really structure them better. But for now, this is gonna show us exactly what we want. So I'm gonna do self.user. So for this, we are going to have a username for this user, for this test user. So here I can say username, any name will be fine. So also let's also have the email. So let's make sure email at gmail.com. Let's also make sure we can get the password. That's also going to be password. So let's make sure the password is also confirmed. So it's also going to be password. So I believe this should be password too. So we want to make sure that these are the names that our template will be sending to the view. So if we went to the template for the registration, we will see that the password is password, the name is password too here, and then I believe this is username. Yes, and then this is email. Yes, good. So that's what we have here. Now, since this is a valid user and we expect that every time the user makes this a request with this data for the first time, they should succeed. Let's go ahead and make an assertion for that. So over here, we're going to make a post request. So you can say self.client, then we're going to post. So the reason why we are posting now is because in the register, this form is supposed to be making a post request, and that's what we want to do. So I'm gonna say post. Now we're going to be posting to the registration URL. So the registration URL has the name of register. So that's what we want to put. Now, so after you specify the URL, you want to now specify the data. So over here you can see that the second parameter here is going to be the data. So here you can pass self.our-user. All right. So this actually should make the request. So I'm going to go ahead and put a response here, because it's also going to return as a response. So we expect this to create a user. Now, to create a user, we can tell by different ways. So for now, we know that every time we create a user here, they are going to be redirected to the login page. So that's what we want to assert. We want to assert that every time this user gets created, we are sent to the login page. So to check that here, we can check self.assert equals. Then we want to check, let's check the status code, because that's what we're going to be checking most of the times. So whenever we sign up a user, they should be redirected. So over here you can see we are checking for a 302, which is the redirect status code. So if we run back this test now, you see that they all pass. And that's because we made this post request and then we're expecting them to be redirected. So now let's test for a scenario where we don't want this user to sign up if their username is taken. Okay, so over here I'm going to duplicate this. So you will actually find that like most of the things you're going to be doing are going to be quite similar. So I'm going to bring up here, and now let's say should not sign up user with taken username. Okay, so how do we really emulate this? And make sure that we can test it properly? So the easiest way to do it is to make the same request using the same payload, because we know that the first one is going to create the user. So the first one is going to create the user in the DB. So if you make the second request in the context of the same test, it should be able to fail. Okay, so that means that we're going to really do this. We're going to duplicate this. So this is going to be, so first let's remove the first one. So at first we are going to make a request to register with the same user. Then we are going to make another request to register with the same user now. So we're going to first make a request to register the user. So that means the user is going to be created now. But now if we make another request, that means it should fail, telling us that these really are taken. So to test it, we are going to be expecting a status code, like a conflict. So there is a status code called 409. So this basically represents when on a server, a similar resource already exists. So this is what we want to check for. Now to check for this, we need to make sure that our code is actually giving this one to us. So actually this brings up a very nice point about why testing can be very important. So it also enables us to refactor our code and to make sure that it is really written in a standard way, because at this point in time, we are expecting that whenever we make this request we make a similar request with the same data, the server should send us a conflict telling us that similar data exists on the server. So now we can go back to our views. Okay, so that's gonna be here. Now here, we can now return this. We can now return this over here. So that's gonna be username is taken. That's gonna be here. We can say return this, and then also we can set the status code. So to set the status code, you can do status equals 409. All right. So if we save this and then we come back to our tests, we also want to make sure that whenever you're writing a test, it is really handling one case. So we don't want it to mess up with really other things. So here I'm going to change the email and also the passwords. So here I'm going to change the email so it doesn't really crash with the passwords. So now if we run back the tests, so we're going to say test again. And you see that now they pass. So also you'll notice that something is really failing over here. So this is about sending an email. So we also want to make sure that we are not really sending an email in test. So Django does a good way of not sending an email in tests. So for now, what we're going to do is over here. So I'm going to go on this function for send mail. So over here in settings.py of the whole app, over here, I'm going to add a simple helper to really tell us if we are running in test mode. I'm going to add this line here and also import sys. So over here, I'm going to import sys. So what this does is it checks which environment we are running in, and then it gives us a true or false. So over here in the view, we can check if, yes, I hope we are settings.testing. So if we are in testing, we don't want to send this. So here we can check if not, then we want to send the mail. So we don't keep getting this error in the console down here. And we'll get back to this. I'll also be showing you some techniques on which you can mock different things as we go. So here if we run back the test, it should run perfectly. Okay, so now I think you guys have seen why this can be important. We are able to go back and refactor our code and to make sure that the code is written in a way that is enforced by what exactly the user should see. Let's also test the same case for the email. So we're gonna have this. I'm gonna do this. Should not sign up with a taken email like this, and then should not sign up with a taken email. So here we can make sure we are using the so here we can change the username and make sure that the first request is done with the same email and the second one is done by the same email. And also I'm going to create another user object here. So you can say, so here I'm going to have another test user object. So we're going to do test user 2. So this one over here, we can make it the same email, but let's change the username like this. And now here we use test user 2. It's going to be self.testUser2 like this. So now what we expect is this should fail and it should give us that on server there was a conflict because we are going to be making 2 requests using the same email. So this is going to succeed, but this should fail and it should tell us that there was a conflict on the server. So if you run this test now, you see that it fails, and that's because our code is not really responding to the way the test should be. So this brings us into a scenario where we have to write our tests first and then we adjust our code to meet our tests, which is a technique called test-driven development. So now we need to make the application really behave in a way that the test expects, because this is what we believe in. This is what is easy for us. This is what the user wants to see. Okay, so now we need to go back to our application. So we're going to go to the views. So views, and also make sure that the application, so whenever a user is using the email that already exists, it is also returning 409. So we're going to go to where we have the email, and also we need to return this 409. So I'm going to go here and add a return. So every time we get the email is taken, we can add this return, and we are returning a 409. Okay, so now if we run this, yeah, it's gonna work. And now we expect that our application is still going to work fine, because it is really being controlled by this test over here, all right, which is like the real world scenario. So now that we have this, I want to show you how you can write a test that checks if the message to tell a user that the username is taken is being shown. So since we are using the messages framework, so over here in register, we've taken username. We can now check if the user is able to see that message on the screen. So to be able to check which messages are available, we are going to have a variable here called storage. So we are also going to import another utility called get messages. So over here, we're going to import it from Django messages. So from Django.messages, import. So it's actually from Django.contrib.messages, import get messages. Okay, so then over here, we can now say get messages. So get messages takes in a request. Now you'll notice that here we are in trouble a bit, because what we have is a response and not a request. Now to get the request itself, what you can do is over here, we can use the response that we already have, and then we want to call WSGI_request. So this will give us the request that was used to make this call. So now that we have this, what we can do is over here, I'm going to actually make a PDB here to show you guys what exactly will be happening. So I'm going to say PDB, import PDB. So PDB is a Python debugger. Now we can use PDB to put breakpoints in our code, and then we can inspect it on the go. So right now I'm going to now run back the test. So you see that when it gets here in the test, it pauses. So now we can inspect what is in storage. So if we do storage, so it's going to give us a storage object, and what we want to do is we want to go ahead and loop over it. So we can say for message in storage, let's go ahead and print the message. So you can do print message like this. So if you run, so when you're in a debugger and you want to make it continue, you can put C and then click OK. So now if we rerun this, you'll see that over here, you see that now we still have we sent you an email to verify your account, and then we also have the username is taken. So the first message was sent for this request, this one, and then the second one was added for this request, meaning that this is okay. Okay, so let's check that this error exists in the second response. So to check this, what we could do here is we could create an array. So we could create something like array, maybe errors equals empty, and then we append to this array every message, and then basically here we assert in. So there is assert in, so we assert in this error, then we want to say it exists in errors, something like this. So to do that, over here we can quickly say errors dot append. So we can append message. So message has a text attribute on it, so that is the one that gives us the exact text string. So now if we run back the test, I'm going to remove the PDB. I'm going to print the errors over here. So now if we run back the test, just rerun it, see that it fails, and that's because message has no object test. This should be message. So we want to do message.message. Okay, so let's rerun it. Now you can see that they all pass. Okay, so just to finish, I want to show you how you can rewrite this using lambda functions so that it's like one line. So what you can do here is, instead of us having to do this for each of these, please append here, we can quickly create a new list here. So we're going to be using the map function in Python. So the map function basically takes in a function and also a list, and then it runs the items in that list in that function. So here what you could do is you're going to be using, it's going to be a lambda function. So we're going to do lambda, then we can do x. So it's going to be an anonymous function. They are called lambda function in Python. So now we can do x.message. Okay, then we want to say that it should exist in storage. So map returns a map object, so we need to turn this into a list. So we can now wrap this in list like this and save. So now if we run back this, I'm gonna rerun it. See that it fails. This should be message, not messages, just like we did before. So now if we run this, you see that now it passes. So yeah, so this is how you can get started, right, testing your Django applications. So in the next video, I'm going to be showing you how to test, how do we log in a user and make sure they are testing things like to do, like creating to-dos, deleting them, and all that good stuff. So thanks guys for watching. I hope this was a good introduction to writing tests. I hope it gave us a general picture on why tests can be important and how they can make you think more about your code. So that's gonna do it for now. Thanks guys for watching. I will talk to you in the next one.